Star Wars Jedi Academy has been said by many as the definitive Star Wars game, a masterpiece even. It has been praised as having the most nuanced and robust lightsaber and force combat mechanics even to this day. I for one am one of those people that agrees, and I feel that Jedi Academy is one of the most perfect Star Wars games to this day, among other games like Jedi Outcast and Fallen Order, which are perfect in their own respective ways. I've already made a video about Jedi Outcast, and I strongly recommend that you check that video out first. So anyways, without further delay, let's go back in time and appreciate the history of the Jedi Knight series that would eventually give birth to Jedi Academy. The Jedi Knight series started all the way back in 1995 with the release of Star Wars Dark Forces. A couple of years later, Dark Forces 2 would then be released, and then a few months after that, an expansion pack called Mysteries of the Sith would be released. Then in March 2001, LucasArts announced that Raven Software would be taking on the project of continuing on the Jedi Knight series, with the next game being called Jedi Outcast. Jedi Outcast would then be released on March 2002, which is almost 20 years ago from this video. Raven Software would then continue to make the next sequel game called Jedi Academy, which would release on September 2003. Jedi Academy would receive great positive reviews. It was praised for the freedom it offered players in terms of its robust customization and its gameplay. Jedi Academy took all of the negative feedback and criticisms from Jedi Outcast and implemented most, if not all of them, in their newest game. One of the main one is being able to use a lightsaber from the very beginning, unlike Jedi Outcast, where you got the lightsaber after the first quarter of the game. Jedi Academy brought with it all of the Force and lightsaber elements from its previous game. It added new elements and improved existing elements in every single way possible, without removing any of the previous mechanics. The game was a direct improvement, basically a literal upgrade of the great combat system from Jedi Outcast. I have to say that I love games that have these incremental systems that innovate, develop, and build upon every single sequel. A few examples I can think of off the top of my head are the God of War trilogy, the Prince of Persia trilogy, and especially the Batman Arkham series. The early 2000s was a great time for Star Wars in gaming. There was such a wide variety of games, and all of them were pushing the boundaries of innovation, accessibility, and replayability. So Jedi Academy was released in the same year as other well-known and notable games, such as Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars Galaxies, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, Warcraft 3: The Frozen Throne expansion, and Need for Speed Underground 1. Among so many more. So Jedi Academy had some decent competition to go against, but it was against other Star Wars games as their main competitor. Now that is something that you will not find in this day and age. So moving on, I personally like to analyze things in a systematic and logical way, and that's how I will be structuring this video. So let's start with the download, installation, and fixes of the game for the PC version. So the download of the game was pretty straightforward because I bought the game on Steam, and last I checked it is still available on the platform. The file size is roughly 1.7 gigabytes, which is nothing. So because the game is so old, the game does not natively support higher widescreen resolutions, but thankfully a fix was pretty easy to do. You just have to modify a couple of the configuration files within the directory and set the values to your native resolution. And if you're someone that still plays older games, this should be really standard stuff. I'll include the links to a couple of the fixes in the description down below if you are interested. Anyways, I also added some quality of life mods, like some texture mods and some UI mods, to make the game a little bit cleaner to look at. The list of the mods are in the description, so now that I had applied the fix and the mods, the game was ready for me to enjoy again. So let's start up the game and see what happens. So once you load up the game, you are met with Jedi Academy's main menu, which is a lot more subtle and symmetrical as compared to Jedi Outcast. Actually, let me know in the comments below which one you prefer. Personally, I prefer the Jedi Outcast menu because it's a better representation of that era of gaming, and it has a lot more character behind it. There's also some iconic Star Wars music that plays in the background, but I cannot play it because the video would get demonetized immediately, so Disney is nothing but efficient, I guess. So, starting the campaign, you have 4 difficulties to choose from. If I was to describe them in easier terms, it's basically very easy, normal, and then nightmare or legendary, I guess. For most casual players, I would recommend the easy difficulty. This is because once you pick a difficulty, you cannot change it through the menu. However, you can change it through some console commands, but I know people generally aren't comfortable with that. Anyways, moving on. Then once you pick your difficulty, you're met with a surprisingly robust customization screen, which had some of the best options available for its time, especially when you compare it to Knights of the Old Republic's customization, a game that was released in the same year as Jedi Academy and was meant to be an RPG game. So in Jedi Academy, you can pick from a variety of well-known races from within the Star Wars universe. This also includes the male and female counterparts as well, and they also come with their own unique voices. So let me give you a quick rundown of the races you can play as. So for the men, we have Human, Rodian, and Keldor, and for the women, we have Human, Zabrak, and my personal favorite, the Twi'leks. So each race and gender option has their own set of unique customization options, like a variety of faces, upper body and lower body clothing, along with a few preset colors that you can pick as the highlight on your clothing. Now, since I'm on PC, I decided to use the mod that adds an RGB slider, so I can pick the highlight myself or change the color for the Twi'leks to whatever I want. Now, one downside of the customization was that if there was a certain piece of clothing that you liked, so for example, if there was a piece of clothing you liked on the female Twi'lek but you wanted to use it on the Zabrak, then unfortunately you can't, because the pieces are locked to specific race and gender options. Now, I have no doubt that there possibly are mods out there that give you more options, so feel free to look around. Then once you pick your race, the next thing you will be doing is to pick your lightsaber. So yes, everyone who complained during Jedi Outcast finally got their wish. You have a range of lightsaber hilts to choose from, and a range of predetermined colors. It still surprises me how detailed the customization was for its time. The game really deserves a lot more props for letting players have this much freedom. There is a mod that adds an RGB slider for your lightsaber blade, so that's pretty much what I went with. So with the customizations out of the way, you are now ready to start the game. So let's begin with the story. So once you start the campaign, you are met with the iconic Star Wars crawl, which gives you a brief history on what has happened so far and where the game will pick up. This is because the story of Jedi Academy is the continuation from Jedi Outcast, but it is not a direct continuation. The events of Jedi Academy take place 2 years after Outcast, and has a new main character that you will be playing as. If you want to find out what happens in Jedi Outcast, I highly recommend that you check out my previous video. I basically go through the story without giving too many spoilers. The entire campaign of Jedi Academy takes about 12 to 15 hours to complete on normal difficulty, especially if it's your first time. So what happens in Jedi Academy, or how does the story actually start? So as I said, Jedi Academy starts off 2 years after Jedi Outcast and has a brand new protagonist. The story starts off with your character, Jaden Core, on a shuttle to the Jedi Academy alongside other students, one of whom is Rosh Pennin, an eager and very outgoing character. His personality makes him come off as annoying or a little bit creepy, but he does play a major role in the main story, and the point of him is he is meant to be annoying. Within the first few seconds, the story establishes that Jaden already has a lightsaber, and just as he or she is about to explain how they got it, the shuttle gets hit and does a crash landing. This is basically the developer's way of saying that it's not important because that conversation never comes up again. So you regroup with Rosh and both of you make your way through the level, which serves as the first tutorial level. As you approach the end, you notice some suspicious activity by a handful of individuals using some sort of spear, which has some energy coming out from it. One of these individuals will be instantly recognizable if you've played Jedi Outcast. So as you're peering around the corner, they notice a sound coming from your direction, and the spear's energy then hits you, which knocks you unconscious. As you wake up, you are then introduced to Kyle Katarn and Luke Skywalker. They will act as the main supporting characters in the story, with Kyle having a more active role. So while everyone is there, a dark Jedi by the name of Elora hacks into Luke's personal logs and notes down all of the locations where he sensed great Force power. This becomes a very important plot point later in the story. So you then make your way to the Jedi Academy, where every student is officially instated. It is now time for you to have a Jedi Master assigned to you, and as you would expect, Kyle Katarn will be your and Rosh's new master. Within a few seconds of meeting Kyle, you get to see what type of person he is, even if you haven't played the previous games. He is a laid-back, no-nonsense, and incredibly down-to-earth individual who has a great sense of humor and great wisdom behind what he says. He is what I would consider the most perfect teacher or mentor anyone could ever ask for. It was literally at this moment that he became my most favorite Jedi of all time.
Master Katarn, it's an honor to be serving under you.
First off, just call me Kyle. Titles make my skin crawl. Secondly, you're not serving under me. I'm going to teach you, and you're going to learn. That's it.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you.
Don't worry, Rosh. You didn't. I've been offended by professionals.
Then both you and Rosh go through the trials while Kyle oversees both of your progress. Within the first couple of minutes, Kyle talks about the Force and how it affects an individual. This definition of the Force is possibly my most favorite interpretation in all of Star Wars fiction, and I'll just let Kyle explain why.
This course will familiarize you with your core Force abilities. These are powers that every Force user has. As you progress in your training, you will learn new abilities. Both the light and dark sides will be open to you. Remember, abilities are not inherently good or evil. It's how you use them. Every Jedi is naturally stronger in different areas of the Force, and it will be up to you to decide what to focus on.
So as you can see, what a simple and beautiful concept. You are free to use the Force power however you wish, but it all depends on your intentions. Then, as both of you finish the trials, Luke notifies all of you that these traces of clothing that they found belong to a cult dedicated to Marka Ragnos, a Sith Lord who died 5,000 years prior to this game. And that is where the story of Jedi Academy kicks off. Now, I will not be talking about the story because I don't want to spoil it for people that may want to play through it. If you are interested in me covering the lore of Kyle Katarn, or even all of the Jedi Knight series, then let me know in the comments below and I'll make an entire video dedicated to the story. Let's move on to the graphics and audio of this game. Now, in terms of graphics and audio, or specifically the art style, Jedi Academy follows the exact same art style and graphics quality from Jedi Outcast. Overall, Jedi Academy has a lot more lighting in pretty much every single map, whereas Jedi Outcast had a lot of darker levels, but that was part of the game's mechanic. That is because in Jedi Outcast there was an equipment called Light Amplification Goggle, and as the name implies, it allowed you to see in the dark until the battery pack ran out. Jedi Academy, on the other hand, does not have any equipment, so it actually makes sense why the levels are much brighter. Now, in terms of textures, the game has pretty good textures that still hold up to this day. Maybe because I'm a bit biased since I still play older games, but I don't see any issues with the 3D models or the relatively low resolution textures in this game. I feel that these older graphics are part of the game's legacy, and they have a certain charm to it. These games are sort of a historical piece that I feel must be preserved in their original form. But honestly though, even today this game looks really good. One of the best parts of the game are the great animations. The lightsaber animations for all types of lightsabers are very stylish, flashy, and basically beautiful. Now, in terms of exploration and level design, the game is a hell of a lot more linear than its prequel, and I mean that in every sense of the word. That's because it was one of the complaints of Jedi Outcast that the levels and puzzles gave absolutely no hints or tips on where to go and what to do. You could easily get lost or have no idea where to go. Personally, I understand where people were coming from, and it makes sense on a casual level, because remember, the vast majority of gamers are casual, and it is the developer's job to respect the player's time, regardless if they're casual or hardcore. That is something that developers just don't do these days. I mean, if you look at all of the games that come out in this day and age, most of them have completely pointless exploration, unnecessary secrets that don't bring any tangible benefits, or an insane grind that results in nothing meaningful or satisfactory. Thankfully, most games in early 2000s actually respected the player's time. There's a reason why most older games can be finished within 10 to 15 hours, as compared to many games today that take upwards of 50 or even 100 hours to complete. I personally prefer Jedi Outcast's level design, because that game was far more of an RPG-like experience, where when you figure out where you have to go, there is this level of happiness that now I get to explore a brand new location, or that I discovered the path all on my own. Whereas Jedi Academy is a lot more focused on the action-adventure aspect, and therefore the levels are designed to reflect that design choice. The perfect example of the differences between Outcast and Academy are in the first two levels. That is because in Jedi Academy, you start off with the lightsaber from point 0. Within a few seconds, Rosh suggests using your lightsaber to cut down the tree. If this was Jedi Outcast, you would have no idea and no one would suggest anything. Then moving on, in the first mini cinematic, Rosh uses force pull on the lever. This now implants the idea in the player that every lever you can find can be manipulated with force pull. And in fact, once you're in the Jedi Academy, that's something that you will have to do. Then at the end of the opening level, which would be roughly 5 minutes into the game, you are now fighting a Dark Jedi. A huge difference compared to Jedi Outcast, where it takes a fair few hours before you get to fight your first Dark Jedi. Then once you're in the Academy and during the trials, this is the part where the game basically holds your hand throughout the trials. You're essentially told exactly what to do. So for example, after you finish fighting the training droids, you are then suggested to use force jump to cross the gap.
Okay, Jaden, you need to use the force to jump across the ravine. It shouldn't be a problem. If you fall, jump back up to the bridge and try again.
After which you're told to use force push to break the wall.
You'll have to use push to get out of here and into the next area.
Then after defeating another droid, you are then suggested to use force pull in order to pull that lever.
To get to the next area, you must pull the lever somewhere in the room, but you can't reach the lever with your hands.
The same one as in the beginning of the game, and then you are then suggested to use force sense to get out of a room.
Solutions to problems aren't always obvious. Use your force sense to see if you can find a way out of the room.
Then finally you're told to use force speed in order to pass through the door before it closes.
You're almost done. You'll need to move fast in this next area. You can use the force to speed up both physically and mentally, allowing you more time to make decisions.
So as you can see, Jedi Academy wasted no time in order to familiarize the player with how the player can interact with the environment. A massive difference compared to Jedi Outcast, where you had to figure all of this stuff out on your own. Now, it's completely up to you whether you think this was a good or bad idea. Personally, I am not a fan, because the game holds your hand throughout the trials, yet the rest of the game rarely integrates the lightsaber and force abilities in exploration or progression. There are a couple of specific areas where you'll be using the force, but for 99% of the game, it's basically just straightforward. I would be perfectly happy if they kept the same trials, yet made the levels more difficult to explore, kind of like Jedi Outcast. Therefore, you would have to use your force powers in order to find the solution and progress forward. This would have given a solid reason for having an easy tutorial mission that basically guides you throughout the trials. Now, speaking of linear level design, Academy has far more checkpoints within the level than Jedi Outcast. So if you weren't manually saving regularly and you died in Jedi Outcast, guess what? You'd have to start from the last save point, which would mean that you would start from the beginning of the level. Because of this, in Jedi Outcast, quick saving and quick loading was almost a requirement. Thankfully, that's not so much of an issue in Jedi Academy, as there are plenty of checkpoints in each level, and the game is relatively more straightforward. However, you should still quick save and quick load anyway. Now, while I'm on the topic of level design, I would like to discuss the variety this game has. Now, since every mission and every side mission is on a different planet, and the length of those missions are relatively good, there is a massive varieties in the areas that you will be visiting. Some areas are small and intricate, while others are absolutely massive but far more linear. Now, each mission itself also has some variety as well. For example, there is a mission where you get to drive a speeder bike really fast throughout the entire level. Alternatively, there are plenty of areas with enemies in tight spaces, so you'll be going around hacking and slashing. Each level also has a handful of secret areas, just like in Jedi Outcast, although they are much more easier to find in this game. These secret areas usually contain some uncommon ammo, so things like grenades, and they also contain either a shield pack or a health pack, so usually there is a good incentive to explore, but it is not a requirement to do so. Now, having said all of that, let's go into the best part of this game, the gameplay, which is a direct improvement over the prequel in every single way possible. Now, how did they accomplish that? Well, they took everything that Jedi Outcast did for its combat, copied it over to Jedi Academy, added new features and elements, and improved existing ones. Jedi Academy in terms of combat is quite literally a direct upgrade, a version 2 per se. The Jedi Knight series has always been iconic for its lightsaber and force mechanics, even to this day. But in addition to its lightsaber and force combat, both of these games feature a fully working first-person shooter aspect as well. The games have a wide range of guns and explosives that the player can use. The only difference between the two games is that in Jedi Outcast, the gunplay was actually a core part of the game's combat, because in Jedi Outcast, there were certain enemies that were very resistant to lightsaber damage and would have a weakness against certain weapons, whereas enemies in Jedi Academy, at least for the most part, can be destroyed by your lightsaber or your force powers, even heavy vehicles like the AT-ST. But the beauty is that if you want to play the game with weapons only for some sort of unique challenge, you are free to do so, as it is a completely viable way to play for both Outcast and Academy. Now, as for the lightsaber combat, which I've described in my previous video, feels very mechanical, very raw and direct. That's because each attack and force power you use is based off of your direct feedback. You as a player have full control with how you swing the lightsaber, and you have to manually aim where you want the force powers to go. So let's break down the lightsaber combat in this game. So there are 3 lightsaber varieties that you can have: single lightsaber, dual wield, and double bladed. For the single blade option, there are 3 different lightsaber techniques: fast, medium, and strong. As the name implies, these styles refer to the speed of the technique, with slower forms doing more damage per swing. Dual wield, on the other hand, allows you to have 2 lightsabers at once, and it has completely unique combat animations and attacks as well. You can also have different hilts and lightsaber colors as well, if you want to channel that Anakin Skywalker look from Attack of the Clones. However, dual wield comes in 2 techniques. You can either have both lightsabers active, or you can deactivate one blade and you can use the single blade in the fast style. Similarly, double-bladed lightsabers function the same way, where you have unique animations and attacks. It also comes in 2 techniques. The first is to use both sides of the blade, or you can deactivate one side and use the single blade in the medium style. Therefore, the strong style is restricted to just the single blade technique. That's because the strong style can bypass enemy defenses, so that means that the enemy won't be able to parry or deflect your attack. And this strong style has always been the best lightsaber dueling technique, either in single player or in multiplayer, at least back when I used to play back in the day. Now, the reason why the combat is so iconic lies with how it is mechanical. A beauty of such a system is, just by looking at your enemy, whether in single player or multiplayer, you can determine which lightsaber style they're using, and you can modify your playstyle accordingly. And with your lightsaber, you can attack in about 8 different directions. and it is all up to you how you combo them together. So first you have your frontal attack and your back attack. This animation plays when you're either moving forward or backwards. Then you have your left and right side attacks, and then you have your 4 diagonal attacks. The same thing extends to all other lightsaber forms and techniques as well. And just like in Jedi Outcast, the game has old and new special attacks based on each lightsaber form you are using. You can find a full list of all of the old and new combat and acrobatic abilities within the journal, which shows you the input requirements as well. I'll briefly showcase some of the interesting special abilities within the game and the inputs that are required. So sit back and enjoy. So as you can see, the freedom that you have with the mechanical gameplay in this game and the sheer number of special abilities really will make this game stand the test of time. There are way more combos, force powers and abilities in this game than even in Jedi Fallen Order, or hell, even more than a lot of games in this day and age. Now you have to remember, they accomplished all of this on hardware that is a fraction or a freaking decimal to the power of the hardware we have today. There is a very valid reason why people say that gaming back in the day was objectively better. Greed was not as prevalent in gaming as it is now. This game is proof of that. Now let's not forget about the incredible force powers in this game, because alongside the incredible lightsaber combat, force powers are also a core mechanic to this game, for both single player and multiplayer. So there are 2 groups of force powers, core powers and alignment powers. Every single force power has 3 levels or ranks. Now just as an interesting side note, all or most of the sound effects they've used are exactly the same as the force powers from the previous games, going all the way back to Dark Forces 2, which was again released in 1997. So for me, these sound effects are just as iconic as the sound effects for the lightsaber, and that's really saying a lot. Now in terms of leveling, all core abilities will level up together and automatically as you complete each act of the main story. Core force powers are basic abilities that every force user knows. This includes force push, pull, jump, speed, force sense, lightsaber offense, lightsaber defense, and finally lightsaber throw, with force sense being the new force power in this game. For the alignment powers, you will need to manually level them up after you start a mission, whether a main mission or a side mission. So the more side missions you do, the more force points you will have. And the best part is, you get to decide which ones you want to level up. Alignment force powers include both light and dark side abilities, and they have a very minimal bearing on the story. Basically all that happens is Kyle and Luke will acknowledge whichever side of the force you're leaning towards more, and that's about it. The main story will remain unaffected.
Jaden, the dark side is not something you play with. Trust me, I know. You better get it under control while you still can.
Jaden, you are playing with powers that will consume you. If you don't change your ways, you will fall to the dark side completely.
I gotta say, I admire how you've kept your balance. You've got a good, strong spirit. Keep it up.
So for the light side powers, you have Force Heal and Jedi Mind Trick, the same ones as in Jedi Outcast. The new abilities are Force Protection and Force Absorb. Similarly for the dark side, you have Force Lightning and Force Choke. Again, the same as in the prequel. The new abilities being Force Drain and Dark Rage. Now the way your core force powers function is very straightforward. The name literally gives it away. So for rank 1 for push and pull, it allows you to use it on one enemy or object that you are targeting. You can also push rockets, grenades, or similar objects back at the enemy. If there is a Dark Jedi using Force Choke on you, you can use either ability to interrupt them. Rank 2 allows you to use the abilities in a limited angle in front of you. and with greater force. Force pull will now disarm an enemy by pulling their weapon out of their hands. Rank 3 is much stronger. You can push and pull with much greater force in a limited angle in front of you, and by using pull, you can now disarm multiple enemies that are affected by this ability. Now if you want to laugh every single time, I highly suggest you use force jump and then use force pull. The resulting screams are just absolutely hilarious every single time. Now, for force jump and force speed, they are very self-explanatory. Each rank allows you to jump higher and allows you to move faster, which also has the benefit of slowing down time around you. Now, force sense is an interesting one. It will allow you to see hidden switches, hostiles, health packs, or shield charging stations through the walls, with higher ranks increasing the range of your senses, and they will now show the enemy and friendly health bars as well. It is actually very useful in single player, especially on higher difficulties. Now moving on to alignment force powers, this is where the fun begins. So let's start with the light side abilities. So Force Heal and Mind Trick work exactly the same as the previous game. So at rank 1, you can use Force Heal to go into a meditative stance, where you'll use a certain amount of force reserves per second and heal at a slow rate. Whereas at higher ranks, you can heal while moving and at a faster rate. For Jedi Mind Trick, at rank 1 you can confuse one enemy for 5 seconds, meaning that they won't be hostile to you or basically ignore your presence. At higher ranks you can confuse multiple enemies for longer durations, and at rank 3 you'll be able to charm a few enemies and have them fight by your side for a limited duration. Unfortunately, it does not work on Force users because, well, they're Force users. Then we have Force Protection, which is pretty much as the name implies. It puts a green barrier around the user and reduces the amount of physical damage you'll take, so things like lightsabers or guns will do reduced damage. Each rank increases your damage reduction and it lasts longer. The other new force power is Force Absorption, which will allow you to absorb force powers that are directed at you. So while the ability is active, if someone uses force push or pull on you, then you will absorb it, and that'll increase your force energy reserves, but you are also immune to those effects. So for example, if someone tries to use force choke, lightning, or drain, it won't do a single thing, and therefore at higher ranks you'll be able to absorb more force energy. And the great thing is, you can use both protection and absorption at the same time to become a literal tank, and you'll notice the color of the effect changes to a more aqua blue color. So the light side is definitely a viable option for certain builds. Now, since I'm more of a dark side enjoyer, let's go through the amazing dark side abilities as well. So let's start with Force Lightning. As the name implies, you channel lightning from your fingertips. At higher ranks, the lightning arcs out at a wider angle and it does significantly more damage. Force Lightning was very underwhelming in the prequel game, but in this game, you can easily clear out a room in mere seconds using this. It really does give you unlimited power, metaphorically speaking of course. Then we have potentially the most overpowered ability in the game, Force Choke. So at rank 1 you will immobilize one enemy and it will do no damage. At rank 2 you will levitate them into the air and it does a minimal amount of damage. At rank 3 is where it becomes godlike. You can grab an enemy and move them around as fast as you can aim. You can also smash them into walls, toss them off ledges, or smash them into the ground, and that'll instantly kill them. You can also couple that with lightsaber throw to instantly kill easier enemies. Then we have Force Drain, which is the dark side equivalent of a heal. At rank 1 you can drain a target's life by standing next to them and stunning them in the process. At rank 2 you can drain from either melee range or from a distance. At rank 3, Force Drain then arcs out over a wider angle, allowing you to drain multiple enemies at a time. And if you're wondering, yes, you can kill multiple people by draining all of their life, like some sort of force vampire. Then finally we have one of my most favorite force powers of all time, Dark Rage. Basically it functions like a berserk. While under the effect you move a lot faster, you deal significantly more damage, and you take far less damage, but your health drains instead. The effect wears off once you've reached critical health, and when that happens, you'll be under fatigue. This is a debuff where you move and attack much slower. At higher ranks, the effects and the duration of the Berserk is increased, while at the same time, it now consumes less health per second. If you decide to use Dark Rage, it works extremely well with either Force Heal or with Force Drain. So as you can see, when we compare Jedi Academy to almost every single other Star Wars game to this day, Jedi Academy still has the most variety of lightsaber combat mechanics and the sheer number of force powers that you have access to. And you are not restricted to using just the light side or the dark side. You can use whichever one you want when you want. Now, what would combat be without the enemies and the enemy varieties? Most of the enemies that you'll be fighting, especially in the early game, will be your basic enemies or your fodder enemies. These are mostly made up of stormtroopers, Imperial officers, and your Imperial workers as well. Then you have your stronger enemies. This includes Weakways, Rodians, and some other vehicles as well. And then you have your Force users, like the Dark Jedis, the Reborns, and the Cultists. There is a massive variety in each type of Dark Jedi that you will be facing. Why? Because this game is all about fighting Dark Jedis and their numerous varieties. Because the lightsaber and force combat in this game are the core mechanic, and that's why the game reflects that design choice. So overall, in conclusion, Jedi Academy is still one of the most perfect Star Wars games to this day. I would even say that the combat and force mechanics of this game are by far the best out of every single game made to this day. Even better than Jedi Fallen Order. But there are a lot of things that Jedi Fallen Order does which are better than pretty much every other game. I will be making a video on that game as well, so make sure to subscribe. As always, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and I will see you in the next video.